So as we continue to kind of look at and consider Paul, what we're going to look at today is relationships. And that may seem kind of awkward and weird as far as what we've been talking about. But so far, kind of as we've walked through Paul's life, as we've journeyed with Paul, what are some of the things that we've talked about so far? Can you remember any of that?
Last time we talked about him going back.
Boldness.
Okay, so boldness, passion.
Well, last time we talked about him like going not the short way to his home. We were talking about him going back to people who had not heard the gospel yet.
Yeah.
So he was like, obviously it worked for their future. So he was like, we got to tell them. So he went the long way. You know.
Okay. So yeah, some of that perseverance.
Yeah.
Thank you. This not giving up and taking on the hardships of life for the better reward.
His transformation.
Okay, his transformation. Yeah, his life change, his redirection because of an experience with Jesus. All of that included multiple people besides Paul, right? It wasn't just Paul. There is several individuals involved in this journey, involved in Paul's life. And one of the things we know is when we have people together, it is inevitable that there will be conflict. There will be disagreements. Even if it's not conflict as far as like Paul and the Jews from Iconium who were coming to kill him, but conflict along the lines of Paul and his co-workers, his people that are laboring in the same direction and having the same passions and desires, they will experience conflict together too. And so conflict is unavoidable. And what we're going to look at today is how does Paul handle conflict with brothers and sisters in Christ? What does Paul do with that? And we're going to kind of relate that to our lives. And so turn to Matthew chapter 5. These are Jesus' words, and this is going to kind of kickstart us. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21. 21 through 24. Says this: You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable for judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come offer your gift. What do you hear in Jesus' words as he speaks here? Hello.
Your relations here on earth, what's the word? They not foreshadow, but they're part of your relationship with God. So if you don't have a good relationship down here, you don't have a good relationship up there.
Yeah. So our horizontal relationships are just as important as our vertical relationships, right? Okay. What else do you hear in Jesus' words about conflict with brothers and sisters, as he says, first go be reconciled and then come offer your gift?
I know I've heard people, and I've done it a few times, whenever you're doing communion, whenever you're having that relationship with God, if you're not in the right mindset for whatever reason, maybe you're mad at someone, they hold off. And if they're doing, whenever Sunday nights church was a thing, you would take communion later that night whenever you were in the right mindset, and you would work through that through the afternoon trying to get whether you're having to talk with someone, discuss something, or you're just trying to pray, whatever it may be, so that you have that good relationship with everyone.
We get kind of that hypocritical. And John says in 1 John, how can one say he loves God yet hate his brother, right? So this idea that we cannot say we love God when we have this this broken relationship with brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that reminded me about, I flipped to it when Forrest was talking in Matthew 7, it says, do not judge, or you too will be judged, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And he talks about the speck in your eye, or the speck in the log in your brother's eye, but the speck in your eye, or the log in your eye. Yeah, the log in your eye, but the speck in his eye. So it seems to be that the Lord is not a fan of, hypocrisy. So.
Yeah. And you notice, especially here in Matthew 7, but also what we just read in Matthew 5, Jesus is speaking to the person to go and make right the relationship, right? It's not expecting someone to come make right the relationship with you. You know, we have a responsibility in those relationships as we have a relationship with God. We have a responsibility to do what we need to do. Paul would say to live at peace as far as it depends on you with others. And so this idea of we need to take some of that responsibility. We need to take the action steps to go make right relationships before we try to bring our offering to God, before we try to live in harmony with God, to live in harmony with others. All of us have had a relationship somewhere, or maybe a relationship now that is strained, that is has been hurt, has been broken in some way or another. What is it? What's the key ingredient to restoring a relationship? Think about relationships in your past. What has been the key ingredient in restoring relationships?
Oh man, I've got 1 Corinthians 13, right?
Love
Love is patient, love is kind, love is slow to anger.
Yeah.
I don't remember the rest, but like I was talking to somebody who, he's been married for a while. He says at one point in their marriage it was like really, really rocky. They said before they went to bed they would read 1 Corinthians 13 to each other, and they would go to bed. But they would just read to each other. And love is patient, love is kind, love is slow to anger, like not quick to boast. I can't remember all of it.
Yeah.
But like that is Paul's thesis of love right there, 1 Corinthians 13. And so like that's definitely part of the equation. I mean,
Yeah.
seemingly.
Yeah, I've heard ministers and I've borrowed their words myself and have told individuals, read these yourself. And if you can put your name in that place, Eddie is patient, Eddie is kind. Ooh, I'm getting kind of burned in this. Be able to put your name in there, and if that describes you, or if it doesn't, then you've got some repairing to do. All right, so love and what characterizes love. What else? What else is a key ingredient to restoring relationship? Forgiveness.
You can't expect to be forgiven if you're not willing to offer that same olive branch.
Yeah, absolutely. So some forgiveness. Being willing to offer.
All this is a kind of a double-edged sword. You can go to somebody and do every one of the things that we're talking about, and if they have a hardened, recalcitrant heart, then it's you talking. It's that Bob Dylan thing, or no, Bruce Springsteen running against the wind.
I think it was really yes.
That makes sense. Anyway, because I know we've been in situations where, and repetition is important too. You just don't go up to them and say, I'm sorry, can we talk? And if they say no, you go, it's over. There needs to be some persistence. But on the other hand, if you go to them over and over and over again, And if the words you choose are attacking, so verbally, you want to, that's where the humility comes in.
Yeah.
It's not, you did this wrong and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Or it's, I must have done something wrong or you wouldn't be mad at me.
Right. There's got to be a my part in there. It would be wonderful. It is a dream if one conversation, hey, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I'm sorry too, please forgive me. And the movie is over and the credits are rolling. It would be great if every relationship was like that, right? But we know that it's not. And so there is some there is some continuation, some persistence in restoring relationship. And we have a responsibility as far as it depends on us, but we aren't the ones who change hearts. God changes hearts. But we do our part in that restoring. That's why there's removing the log from your own eye, because it's what role have you played in this? What forgiveness do you need to seek before you seek to offer that some forgiveness on their part?
Can I add, Eddie, that I don't think you can restore a relationship texting.
Oh, like through a text message. Okay.
I'm sorry, texting, I'm sorry. Face to face, eye to eye goes a lot farther if you're trying to restore a relationship.
Yeah. Restoring a relationship requires conversation, then we might say. That might be a key ingredient in a face-to-face conversation, dealing with what has come up to ruin or strain the relationship. And that comes through a conversation. So we got to be willing to get face-to-face and have a real conversation.
I think letting go sometimes. We've been going through presidential debates, and within 30 seconds over, what do? Fact check. And so I think a lot of times whenever we get angry at somebody, we're trying to check the facts of, are they telling the truth, or they lie to us, or ourselves. They do it for us, and so when we're trying to resolve that, like sometimes we should let things go and not try to go, okay, well, no, that's not what you said, or that's not what you meant, or whatever. We basically yield that this is over and that we move on and let it go.
On the same vein, scorekeeping.
Scorekeeping, yeah.
Which again comes back to, both of those kind of come back to 1 Corinthians 13, this idea of love, that there is no keeping a record of wrong, right? It's not, I've forgiven you 30 times and you have yet to forgive me once, and so we're done, right? But yeah, and there's things that we let go of. We cannot hold on to things that don't matter as much as a loving relationship and a representation of Christ in our lives, right? So if those are some of the key ingredients, I want us to kind of look for those as we read about Paul. All right, so Acts chapter 15 is where we're looking at Paul's life. Last week, it was kind of the end of his first missionary journey, and this is in his second missionary journey. So his second missionary journey is about twice as long as the first. The first missionary journey was about walking from Lubbock, Texas to Sacramento, California, about 1,800 miles, right? We drive that in 20 hours, something like that, compared to, Paul walking that. This missionary journey, his second one, is the same as going from Sacramento, California to Newark, New Jersey. Just kind of walking across the nation, if you put it in a straight line. So it's quite a few more miles and quite a few more things that are taking place. But we're going to pick up in Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 41. If someone wants to read that for us. Acts 15, starting in verse 36 and going through the end of that chapter.
Some time later, Paul said to Barnabas, Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with him. But Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyrus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches.
Okay. What is Paul and Barnabas setting out to do? Or what is their goal, their mission on this second missionary trip? What chapter? This is chapter 15 of Acts.
They're doing,
Checkup.
A checkup?
yeah, I was gonna say a house check. They're just gonna visit.
Yeah,
You
they're
were
gonna-
all into it last time we were here. How you doing now?
Absolutely. They're coming back. They're following up with the disciples that were converted, with the churches that were established. Let's go see how everyone is doing and continue to strengthen and build up the body. That's their mission and that's their goal. Kind of the idea is the word, the news has been spread. Let's go back and follow up with one another. And we left last week kind of with that same idea. This turnaround in Derby was because we needed to go back and strengthen and encourage some of the Christians that we have journeyed with, right? And that was the challenge this week, was who are you encouraging in faith? Who are you walking with and keeping encouraged? And so here we see Paul kind of doing the same thing. This is some time has passed. Let's go back. Let's continue to encourage and strengthen the believers. But in their planning, there's a sharp disagreement. What does that mean? What is a sharp disagreement?
My guess is there were words, the volume got loud. I doubt if they were pushing and shoving, but it was pretty evident that they were in disagreement.
It is interesting that Luke chooses this word to say there was a sharp disagreement instead of there was a disagreement, or a disagreement arose between Paul and Barnabas. And so it's more than just we don't have the same idea, but there's some type of a fight that takes place. And it may not be pushing and shoving, but this is Paul we're talking about. I don't know that that's out of the question either. There is a dispute between Paul and Barnabas. And what's this dispute over?
He's a quitter.
Who's a quitter?
John Mark.
Yeah, John Mark. They were on mission and John Mark deserts them. John Mark quits on them and does not return to the work. Again, we don't know exactly what happened and what took place, but it was enough that Barnabas and Paul have a sharp argument about this. They have a feud over John Mark's actions and whether or not he should continue to go or be invited to be a part of this next missionary journey. Who's right? Who's right in this argument?
Yes.
Yes. We don't have a lot of the details, but why do you say yes?
I mean, God uses it both ways. They went separate ways, so they met more people than if they all went together.
Yeah.
Four missionaries.
Absolutely. Now listen, God did not cause this argument to happen, right? But does God work some good out of this argument?
Well, it says, I got it out here, that by the end of his life, Paul wanted Mark to come see him before he died.
Yeah, Ephesians 4. Paul invites, Paul says, sorry, not Ephesians 4, that's the wrong note. 2 Timothy 4:11. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me in ministry. So this relationship has been restored. We know Paul and Barnabas have continued relationship after this, and we now see that Mark is being pulled back into the ministry by Paul. And so there's been some healing that has taken place. There's been restoration and renewal. But here's this idea that, at least in this moment, God's the winner, even though it seems like nobody else is. Like nobody wins. It seems like there's a fight and the church is being divided. But is that what's taking place?
I'm reading the message, but it says tempers flare. I can understand that better. Tempers.
Tempers flare. What does that change for you?
To me, that I think there was somewhat of argument, but the way I took it was Paul, being as he was a leader, was motivating. I think he was kind of calling them out to the rug, to carpet, to the line, to whatever. And even though they had an argument, I think that motivated maybe this particular John Mark to step up his game, you know, that when the going got tough.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to need to step up our efforts.
I kind of see it a little bit differently, sorry.
Okay. What?
Grammar correct.
None of us checked it.
It's a good thing. Yeah. Anyway, Barnabas was probably an encourager.
He was.
If he did see something that was weak, forcing somebody into a situation where Paul probably, in many cases, could be a hard case. And that may have not served to build him up as much as he would be going begrudgingly. And this way, with going with Barnabas, he probably was able to talk it out, think about it, learn, and he was probably more patient with him than Paul would have been.
I think there's both of those things are going on. There is, this stark disagreement. Surely John Mark is going to know about this. He's not with them at the time, so he doesn't experience this this disagreement. But it doesn't mean he doesn't know about it. And so there is this calling to step up, to raise the level of my life, the commitment in my life, and the boldness and the endurance in my life. But you're probably right too, Bill, is that had John Mark continued to go with Bill, that may have distracted more from the mission than it would have encouraged it and helped it. And it may be that he worked better with Barnabas, who was the encourager. And encouragement, let's understand what that means. To encourage somebody isn't just to make them feel good about who they are and what they're doing, but it's to give courage, to motivate and bring out the courage from within, to embolden somebody. Does that make sense? And so it's not that just Barnabas, the encourager, was making John Mark feel good. Oh, I still need you. You're still helpful, but we can keep going. But it was giving him what he needed to rise to that level that Paul wanted him to be in. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it's not. I mean, we've all known people who have such a zeal that it's a little scary. Paul would be intimidating to
Absolutely.
me because his zeal was probably 100%, where most people's linger around 80 maybe. But he had such an experience on the road to Damascus that his life was forever changed because everything he believed to be true, he found out was not. So his zeal, I mean, I could call names in Greenlawn, but I won't, who have a scary zeal, and it's wonderful, but they can't condemn other people if they don't have that zeal. I see what happened here is what happens in marriages when an argument starts.
Here's-
Here's for Doug. Bill turns over.
He forgot something. When I start the argument is what she meant to say.
No, I used to work for psychologists, and I remember them talking about when marriages have people, doesn't have to be marriages, have arguments, they have what they call gunny sacking, Because you're carrying around that gunny sack with everything that's happened the past year.
It's like Freudian theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you start an argument, you open up that gunny sack and spread it all out. It has nothing to do what the original argument's about, but it's about everything else that you're mad about for the past year or so. Could be what happened here between Paul and Barnabas. I'm sure when they were shouting and having a flare of temper, it wasn't on just one subject. I think it probably veered off and Barnabas could have said, you need to calm down a little bit or something.
Yeah.
I'm thinking probably that had some gunny sacking going on.
There was probably this idea, like Jordan brought up, this idea of keeping a record of wrongs.
Right,
Of
right.
bringing up old things that have not been worked through, have not been forgiven, have just been held on to.
Well, they just came off an argument about circumcision, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't with one another.
I thought more Paul and Barnabas were disagreeing.
That was with the Jerusalem Council.
But I would say
and the-
between that
the
and being
Jews.
stoned and everything else that they've been through, tensions were probably high anyway. So this was probably a long time coming if we look back. Because, I mean, it doesn't take much to make someone angry when you've got, just an argument between people. It doesn't take much for that to get heated. But then you add on everything they've been through to this point, and it's just, I mean, I can imagine this was probably, if this had happened earlier in their trip, it might not have been such a big deal, but because it happened when it did, it was the breaking point. It's like,
Yeah,
right,
I think they cleared the air about a lot of things.
yeah, it's like, you know what, we just need some time apart.
They probably did. Let's zoom out a little bit.
Wait, I have a question. I have a theological question that I struggle with.
Okay.
Maybe your opinion's good. So, I guess I'm completely changing paths, so if we don't want to do this, then it's fine. But I guess it's a question of divine predestination or free will. And so you said that God did not cause this disagreement to happen. And so I struggle with this. I don't know the answer to this. I hold more to the view that, like, before God's decree of creation, he knew that Paul would have a disagreement, this would happen, and these things would come of this. And then I think of this proverb that I always go to is the lot is cast into the lap. It's every decision is from the Lord, or he holds all things up to the power of his word. And so could it be that that's what God wanted? He wanted that disagreement to happen, and he did cause that to happen, and he knew that good things would come from that. Like, if, for example, like in Genesis, Joseph says, "You meant for evil, but God meant for good." And so he determined everything from the beginning to the end. So I know I kind of switched it up a little bit, but could it be that he wanted that argument to happen because he knew what would happen from it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. See, so what Paul would say is that because God foreknows, he predestines.
Exactly. That'd be in
So-
Ephesians.
So it's this idea that he knows what's going to take place.
Yeah.
He knows that they're going to split into 4 missionaries instead of one.
Yeah.
Two missionary journeys, 4 missionaries instead of 1 missionary journey, and so the gospel is being spread even wider.
Yeah.
And so as we zoom out and look at this, one thing we recognize is that they're on the same team, if we want to call teams, right? They have the same mission. They have the same purpose. God didn't cause the argument to happen, but he also didn't stop it from happening.
Yeah.
Jesus' prayer in John 17 is not that God removes his children from this world and removes them from the hardships that are to come, but that he guides them through that he protects them is what Jesus prays about. So it's this idea that the struggles that we experience make us stronger, right?
Mhm.
And there is free will, there is free choice, but God knows what's going to happen.
To me, free will is kind of like watching a movie you've already seen. You know what's going to happen.
But
Just you don't do anything. You can't do anything about it. But the fact is we don't do anything about it. You know that your favorite character is about to die. You've seen this movie 1,000 times, but nothing you do is going to change it at that moment. So to me, that's kind of like a really, really narrowed down version of how free will is seen. God knows what's going to happen, but it's not something he caused or something he wanted or something he's going to interfere with. And he can work with it, and he can change your life from that point, but I think it's more of a, he's just watching a movie he's already seen.
Yeah, sorry, that's a topic I struggle with a lot. And so like I'll read like, like Reformed theology, we'll talk about Ephesians and like 2 Peter, the word elect and all these things. And then so, a 5-point Calvinist would say, he would be a divine predestination person. He would say that there is no free will, and ultimately it's a movie that's everything is predetermined. Or you have like the Arminian view, which would be like free will, but God works things through all of these like counterfactuals. And so I don't know what it is. Did he cause the argument? Like, did he know that would happen, or is it that he kind of like a backdoor pathway used it in his like divine sovereignty, or is it just a linear pathway that
Jesus gave us a choice. It tells us that murder is the same as being angry with our brother.
Yeah,
And
but
for us, we would have the choice to be angry with you or not to be angry with you. I feel like to answer your question is the argument is there because we have a choice to interact with each other. We have the ability to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
God is in charge of everything else, but we can make our decision. Either we're going to follow him or not, or we're going to be angry with each other. I think it blows my mind that Jesus would say it's murder, the same as being angry. If he said in there, and I'm like, I don't see anybody going to prison for life because they're angry at someone. But what he's trying to tell us is that there's more to it than just the simple fact of trying to figure out if there's strings being pulled or if I'm in the right place. You're about to propose to someone. That's your choice.
right, yeah.
You chose her. She's going to choose you. Well, we hope after you go on and die.
Yeah.
Well, she probably will. But my point is that you guys are making a choice there for life.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yes, predestined. Sure, it's the one. Yeah, I think that God establishes us to make those decisions and to mold us to who we need to be in order to be His tools or His followers or His servants or His leaders, or put it whatever you want there, for us in order to achieve what He ultimately wants to be done here on earth.
Yeah.
So, the yes that we're getting to is the yes to God's will, right? Look at Jesus praying in the garden. Before his arrest, before his crucifixion, Jesus is in the garden praying, and he asks his disciples to stay here and stay awake or be alert or to watch as he goes off to pray. He goes off to pray and he comes back and he sees them sleeping. Couldn't you even stay awake for a little bit? Knowing that this is like in the middle of the night. They're obviously tired, but he's still, couldn't you stay alert? And he goes off and he prays again. When the mobs come and arrest him, and the arrest takes place, what happens to the disciples? They run in fear. But when the mob comes to arrest Jesus, what do we see him doing?
Okay, he lets them take it.
Yeah. He stands up and he's so bold at the arrest. Is it Luke or is it John? I think it's Luke, who says that the mob falls back on themselves. They say, "Who are you looking for?" "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." And he says, "I am he." And it says that they fall back on top of one another. They're there with swords and fire on a stick. Torches. Thank you.
It is fire on the stick.
They're there with swords and torches, and it's a mob that's coming after him. And his boldness comes from where? How is Jesus able to stand before that mob and be so bold that they become scared?
He knows it's the power
Yeah.
of God.
It's the power of God. He's confident in God's word. He's confident in what prayer has done for him. He spent the night in prayer. Prayer, we often look at prayer as, God, I need this. God, you're my genie in the sky. Would you please take care of things for me? What prayer is for us to examine our lives and align our lives up to God's will, right? And to align what is God willing and doing in this world around me and in the situations and relationships.
And
So
we have
our
to
yes is to
remember,
God's
in the
will.
garden, he was praying earnestly for plan B.
Yeah. He wanted something else. If there's another way, Lord, but what?
He accepted God, his father's.
Accepting God's will.
I had a pretty good debate with a friend of mine that's, he's very big in that predestination, and, there is no free will. You'll do exactly what you're
Yes, be reformed.
Yeah, and one thing I asked, I was like, well, it's gonna depend how you define some of those terms. Like, if free will is like free, if you're free to make your choice, but you're not in control of what happens after that, which we experience every day. You can make a choice, but you have no idea what the fallout from that choice will be. That's free will, and you can experience that every day. And I would assume the same would apply to God. If you know you can do whatever is good, righteous, and just, then I can make the choice, and that's my free will. But the fallout from that choice is out of my control, which we experience every day.
Yeah, I struggle with free will a lot because does that mean that salvation is dependent on the human? Does that mean that he's not the author of salvation if it requires a conscious decision from that person? So a Calvinist would say faith is a work. They would say that if God does not predetermine faith, then in some sense the human is the author of salvation because they choose the salvation. And so that's like, so I don't know the answer to this.
So
And, but it's something
we add to that, and we're kind of rolling off of where we're going.
yeah, it's always
I think it's okay. I think it's okay, but we add to that Paul's words, his instruction to us to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, right?
Yeah.
And working out our salvation is saying that yes to God and his will, God and his desires for our lives and following in that. Bill's burning that thing.
I am here. And I only have 5 minutes to screw this whole talk up. We tend in the church to compartmentalize things and say, we're going to talk about this, and we talk about only that aspect of it. And the same way we do a chapter, we look at a chapter and we say, look at this chapter, and we discuss it ad nauseum, and then we don't ever bother to consider what was the chapter before and what are the chapters after saying and how do they tie in together. We don't make the whole connection. We tend to focus. Nowhere in this have I heard any of you say anything about Satan prowling the earth like a lion wanting to devour people. And he has a role in this. And he's doing things in our lives and in our world to counteract the very things that God is doing. Now, what do we choose? God or Satan? We're supposed to be discerners of the word. When we agree to be committed to God, we're going to make those decisions that are godly, not godless. And so, yes, there is a free will choice, and we can't deny Satan's role in this whole scheme of things. And that's where God, in his infinite knowledge, works in people's lives to, if we make that wrong choice. How many times have people made wrong choices? They've lived through it only to look back and say, man, was I stupid? I need to be following God. And so God's still working in all those poor people who have been godless.
Who have made a choice of who's going to lead their life. That's exactly where earlier I said Ephesians 4:26 and 27. That's where that verse was heading us towards. There Paul writes, maybe in a remembrance of this opportunity, maybe he learned through this opportunity, but he writes these words, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity for the devil, or to the devil. So here's this idea that Satan is at work too. And we constantly have to make this choice of whom will I serve? Whom will I glorify? Whom will I allow to be Lord over my life?
I can say two things, one of which could be interpreted very negatively. maybe both. When I got married, I don't know exactly who it was that told me. It was probably her father, but he said, marriage is work. Every day, you've got to work at this thing. If you don't, it's not going to be successful. And being a Christian is the same way. It's work. You can't just get up. Her father also had a favorite phrase about people who are clueless. They wake up each day like a duck in a new lake. You know, and this, we can't just go through our Christianity that way. We just can't go through it mindlessly. That's where studying, prayer, and communing, all these things that we're talking about come in.
Let me leave you with one last verse. We'll end with this one and invite someone to lunch and continue this conversation later. Possible. 1 Corinthians 10:31. In our disputes, in our relationships with one another, in our discussions over high theological things that are difficult for us to understand and to make sense of, in our political views, in whatever. 1 Corinthians 10:31 Paul says, so whether you eat or drink, and again, this is going back to, the context of this is disputes among believers, not the church and the world, but disputes among believers. He says, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. Make your choices on, will my behavior, will my action, will my words, will this bring glory to God? And if we look at our conflicts, we look at our relationships and our actions with that motivation. I want to glorify God even in this dispute. How can I glorify God and not myself or my wisdom or anything else? All right. I don't know what next week's class is about, but I'm sure it's going to be fun too. So
Sorry, I can think about something. I'm like, this is bothering me.
No, it's good.